So today we have Chewy with us, expert in AeroPress, you know. So what we kind of want to do here is provide a little more of an entry-level, more introductory course in AeroPress, but also for people who use AeroPress and are looking to kind of improve on their workflow. This is great as well. So, you know, we brought Chewy in today to kind of run through the specifics of that and, you know, let me take it away.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, how Alan said, my name is Chewy. Well, that's my nickname. My actual name is Mario. I have been a professional barista for the last 9 years, going to multiple competitions. One of them was the AeroPress regionals and nationals last year in the United States, where I made it to the semifinals in the national and also did the first place in the regionals in Europe. So, besides that, also I have been brewing AeroPress for the last 7 years. So it's my favorite method or device to brew coffee at home or even in the coffee shop. So yeah, we're gonna use the AeroPress just because it's the most versatile and easy to use at home. But the whole idea is that we're gonna go through the different parameters. Sorry, I need water. And the different steps in the coffee to understand how extraction works and how can I elevate my extraction, how I can highlight different flavors, even though I using the minimum equipment at home. So yeah, so for that we're gonna move on with the first topic and we're gonna mention what is extraction. So in simple words, extraction is the solubility that the coffee is and water is soluble. In other ways, the water pulls out from the coffee grounds flavor. How that happen? Because physics and chemistry. In coffee, we have two different terms. One is over extraction, and the other one is under extraction. What it means? Under extraction will be that I have too short in my extraction, and that will represent sourness and a weak coffee. How do I know that I'm over extracting? That means I have too much. That will be a coffee that will be too concentrated. Some people will use that as a strong, but pretty much will be intense, and also will be a lot of bitterness on it. So the goal today is that you will be able to balance it out and hit the sweet point of extraction. In psychotechnical, I will say that extraction should be between 18 and 22%, but we don't want to go into that because we need a refractometer for that, and I don't want to confuse anyone. So that is what is extraction about. So the first variety that we're going to talk about will be ground size. How the ground size has an impact on my coffee. First one is I go to coarse, and the main characteristic that I'm going to have will be that my coffee will be more sour. I'm going to be able to extract more of the acidity part of it, leading me to like a possible under extraction, and a weak coffee. Why is this happening? Because the particles of the coffee, of course, they go, the water will need more time to like go through all the surface of the coffee, so it will need extra time to be able to extract all these flavors. The opposite happens when we go to fine. As I go to fine, I will have a coffee that will be more intense, more bitter, and leaning onto an over extraction because the water will go through the whole cellulose of the coffee too quick. So that's a way to tell for the diagnosis. Is I brewing a coffee and I try it and I taste it too strong, too intense, or too bitter. That's leaning that probably I'm using that is too fine. So the quick way to fix it is just adjusting my setup in the ground side to a higher number in the ground. Usually all the grinders in the market, they go like 0, that will be the finest one that I can go with my grinder, up to like a higher number, maybe 20, maybe 40, maybe 50. So it's closer to 0, finer you go, farther than 0, closer you go. Also, in the grinded part, there is different types of grinders. We have electric grinders, the ones that sit on the table. We have manual grinders like the one that I have here. We have like blade grinders also that are electric. So depends the bores, you're gonna have different ground sizes. If you have a conical bore versus a flat bore, one will be more precise than the other ones. Usually the conical bores are made to cut more than crush. So usually they will give you an more uneven sizes of ground size versus a flat board, because the flat board is not only cutting, it's also crushing at the same time. So it's leading also the coffee bean to break in a natural way. Kind of like when you use a squeeze a coffee bean that they just break because it's finding those like porosity, where are the softest or weakest spots in the coffee bean. So it breaks easier because you are crushing it and then cutting it. The grinder that I never recommend to people is a blade one, because that is just cutting and you don't have an actual way to set up a size. Basically, it's just like more time that is running and cutting, finally you go. But in that moment you will have an uneven, and then you might be having an issue that you will have too much fines inside of that spectrum of ground size. So recommendation is you can buy like a electric grinder, go with flat bores. It's not try to get like a conical stainless steel or titanium bores hand grinder. That will be like also pretty quick. And then the other one will be like, if you don't have a grinder, just go to your local roaster, your local coffee shop, and just tell them, hey, can you grind this pack for me for AeroPress or for like a specific method or roller or coffee maker they have at home. And that also can be subjective depending the personal preference or recipes that each barista. So that's why we are talking about different parameters, because that will be, if I cannot control the ground size, I can control everything else. And for that reason, we're gonna jump to water. Hotter the water, you have more extraction. Coldest the water, you have less extraction. Why? We will see water as energy in this case, or the temperature of the water as energy. I need a specific amount of energy to be able to penetrate the whole cellulose of the coffee and be able to pull out those flavors. Higher temperature, higher energy, which means that the break through the cellulose will be faster and easier. So that's why I have more extraction. Coldest, I will have like, obviously it will take longer to the water to penetrate, and I will have like less extraction. Recommendations for that is you are able to get a kettle that you can set up the temperature, and you always can have that in a constant temperature will be the best. It's not, try to have like something that gives the water to boil point, and every time that you are like finishes a pour, just set it up and turn it again. Because the issues that some people start with, like, for say something 200 Fahrenheit degrees in the hot water, and then it's slowly not decreasing because the water is just going down as they are brewing. You won't be able to extract more flavor because you already hit a point in the cellulose with that first temperature. So if you're using something that is a little cooler, you won't be able to hit the same spot. You're gonna fall somewhere in here. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. That will depend your preference and what are you looking for the coffee. There's also different coffees that they need different adjustments in temperature. For example, you can go hotter with a light roast because the porosity will be harder because they spend less time in the roaster, so the cellulose is more complete. So you will need more energy to be able to break that. For dark roast, you need less temperature because they are more breakable, they are more soft, they have more porosity, so water can break through the cellulose way faster. And it's what you start to do those compensations. Okay, I have like a coffee that I didn't ground, it's ground fine. I know that I need less time for extraction. So if I want to heat the same time, like 2 minutes and a half, I'm gonna pull down my temperature. Also, the quality of the water that I use in Brewing right now. At the coffee shop, we control the minerals that we add because we're very intentional with what flavors we want to do. You don't want to go that deep. Just get the very nice purified water or spring water. Try to reduce that water because that is just very high in minerals. And what's happened? Water also has a saturation point. So if my water is already 2 I won't be able to have the best cup of coffee out of that coffee. But also the minerals helps with the polarity, meaning that some specific minerals attract specific compounds in my coffee that they are translating in flavor. So if I have a water that has too low ppms, I won't be able to reach that polarity and I won't be able to extract also everything. That's why we also recommend something between 90 to 120 ppms. That's pretty common in the majority of purified waters, especially that perception of magnesium and calcium. That's like the best thing. And yeah, and then, you know, cold water leads to an under-extraction that we already know that translating something that's gonna be weak in a real sour. And if we have like an over-extraction, something that will be too bitter and like strong. So right now that's an example of like under-extraction and over-extraction. This will be a blind testing, so I won't tell you which one it is. It will be your job to guess.
We should use.
Yeah, exactly. I had it out there.
Clear, clear with that.
We also played around very in the edges of the extraction, so it's easier to like tell.
Yes. That was a little tough, right? I'd rather take one that's under-extracted.
Yeah. That's sometimes what happens a lot of time with like brewing.
Yeah.
We start to normalize a lot in under extractions just because they are more drinkable, for
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Neither of them is good,
Yeah.
but if I have to pick one, I'm gonna pick under extraction always.
Yeah.
But there is a way to fix an over extraction, at least for like be able to drink it, and it's the technique that we call compas. That which means that we're gonna add hot water over the coffee that is already extracted to dilute that concentration to try to reach a balance. It's a technique that we are very intentional to use because sometimes there are coffees that they have too much to offer you. That when you, even though you are in the right spot in the extraction, they are just overwhelming because they have too much to give. So sometimes we go around the a little bit the edge of the over extraction in concentration, and we just start to dilute it because we already extract enough, but it's still in a very intense capacity that we're still not able to sense or to feel all the flavors in there, and we do that by so we're gonna try to do that when we go hands-on. We're gonna try to do one AeroPress standard and one like using micro so we can feel that difference and how we can like fix that issue when my coffee cup I just do less water, it's already ready. It's not, you can always find a way to fix it. And leading to that, we're gonna talk about that foundation. What is that? The ratio. The proportion of how much water I need for how much coffee. The easiest way to tell them is like finding your favorite coffee cup and just measure that how much water you can fit in there. So for example, to me this is like 12 ounces. I know that this will be around 360 almost 400 milliliters. So in Barismo, we have like a standard that would be for each gram of coffee, I will need 16 milliliters or grams of water. So I already know that this is 360. So it's gonna divide that through 16, and I know that that will be somewhere close around 20, 18 grams of coffee. So that I know that that's the amount that I'm gonna need. Is that a golden rule for every coffee? No. But that's a very sweet starting point. You brew the coffee with that proportion, and then you test it. Because you already know how to feel is when it's too much intensity of flavor and when it's too little. So if I feel that in a ratio 16, my coffee is too weak, leading to like an under extraction, I can cut down that water, or I can add more time, or I can add more water. We don't talk too much of the time in the very beginning because time is the most variable of the rules because it will depend on your ratio. Longer ratios, you will extracting very slowly. The other one will be advention. Advention usually is the one that we create the most when we're doing a percolation method, like a V60 or even a drip machine. It means that you are just pouring water, and while you're pouring, you are creating some sort of agitation. This agitation is heating with waves of energy the coffee, and it's accelerating that process. That's why I like the AeroPress, because it combines the two of them. If you do it like the standard, like this, once you start to pour your water, you will start creating that adventure. Once you put the envelope on top and you seal it, you're gonna create immersion, because this kind of creates a vacuum seal that coffee gonna start to drip until you press it. So the coffee that is already in your vessel, that will be just percolation. Everything else will be immersion. I don't like that one too much because I cannot control the first drops already. So sometimes it's hard to balance in that way. So I always want to recommend doing the better version, when you just having standing up like this and you are playing around mostly with the immersion point. How I am able to create some adventure at this point, I can use the little palette thing that comes with the AeroPress, where I can use a spoon and I just create agitation right here. What is the best way to create agitation? Back and forth. Some people will like do circles, but in that moment those waves of energy are smoother, so you're not able to extract enough. When you're doing back and forth, you are hitting in two directions the coffee, once after one, so you are able to extract more flavor. How much agitation am I gonna need? You're gonna figure out once you try it. Sometimes you try it, it's like maybe too strong, so you do less agitation to try to extract less flavor. And all the other ones, you can like control that better. For example, in this case, I'm gonna do that, for example, with this kettle that I cannot control the water temperature, because always gonna give me boiling point, which means that I have to be more intentional with the agitation that I will be creating and with the ground size that I'm gonna use to balance it out. So at the end, what we're looking for with any coffee is balance. How I identify balance in coffee. Some people will say that sometimes balance will be just something that will be completely level. In coffee, we call that coffee that is flat. That is a meaning for a coffee that doesn't have any source of personality. Balance in coffee is that you are able to feel the main flavors that you feel in your tongue. That would be sweetness, acidity, and bitterness in full synergy, in harmony. So I want to start like with some acidity, then start to fade, and then appears the sweetness, and when it starts to fade, appears the bitterness that usually attached with the aftertaste, so it's the last flavor that we feel. So our job is like play around with that. How do I know that? Ground size. We go back to the beginning. More fine, more acidic. So if I'm using too fine a ground size, my acidity gonna go very sharp. So how I can balance it out? Okay, I go a little more with less temperature, that I know that when I force to under extraction, that will be a little more bitter. So start to go down like that. And that is the job of the barista, of the coffee maker, find that balance within the coffee. So for that, we're gonna go hands on. We're gonna make a AeroPress. I'm gonna make one first, for you can try it, and then I wanna leave you with one that you can do by yourself with the tools that you have in front. You have also an electric grinder, but I have the manual one, so we can use either or. If you wanna go like all hands in the game, we can. Any questions before I start?
Yeah, I want to see.
Okay.
And then I'll have questions later.
Perfect. Also, something that I didn't mention, that's a little more for the intermediate professional levels, is the material that my pour over is made of. Right now I have glass right here, that is the one that I'm gonna use. You have acrylic or plastic in your table. We talk about water as energy. Glass is a better conductor of energy, which means that will make my job even harder when I extract it. People will say, oh, if it's a better conductor, I should choose that one. It's like, no. Why? Because the glass is a better conductor than coffee for energy, which means that all that heat will be distributed first around the glass and later to your coffee. So you're gonna lose all that momentum for like extraction. If you choose acrylic, it's a harder conductor, so that coffee will be the thing that's gonna start to absorb all that energy first. Plus, the glass needs more energy to stay heated, so we're gonna stealing all that energy. So for this one, that's why I use that one, because I'm using boiling point, which will be like sometimes too hot. So it's kind of like also balance it out. The idea is like knowing your tools, knowing the parameters that you can play around to try to take the right decisions, so you have like the best cup of coffee every single time. No, this is technical. Oh man, how did this make my lamp thing? Months. Also next to you, you have a little card that resumes everything that we will talk about, the extraction, the water, what is the ratio, and a little diagnosis reviews like, what do I do is my coffee is not extracted, or what did I do is it's too sour. What can I do is I didn't buy, my coffee is already ground. Those kind of questions. To kind of lead your way to your home to make the extraction part easy. These ones are not made only for the AeroPress. This is a very nice resume for like the principles of brewing. So you can apply all these rules and all these questions to any different way to make coffee, even to espresso. Is I honest, when I took my first brewing certification by SCA, is when I understand even more the espresso work. Why? Because all these parameters also apply for espresso. But the espresso always gonna be 10 times, 20 times more intense than a pour over. So be able to be more precise with the bitterness, the acidity, the balance in something that intense is harder than something that has more dilution. So I enjoy the brewing teaching more than espresso for that reason. People can see better results faster, and not all the people is used to drink espresso.
Acquired taste.
Mm-hmm. So we're gonna use 16 grams of coffee today, and how we know that the ratio will be 16, so we're gonna need a total of 256. Yeah. Or we can do like 260 also. You always can go by decimals, honestly. Fun fact is for my last round in the New York AeroPress, I ended using 16.2 grams of coffee. People was like, oh my god, he's so intentional, he's using decimals. And honestly, I just go a little over and didn't have time to like just pull those 2 grams out, and I was like, okay, it's gonna go like that. But you look more professional. You look like, oh my god, that dude knows what he's doing. When it's done, I set up my time and I pour the water. It's very important when you pour, you try to pour as fast as you can for the AeroPress, so you are able to wet all the coffee. For those 260, we're gonna divide 160 inside of the AeroPress. Why? And that's the only reason why I prefer the inverted, is because usually always lead you to using bites. Because so you only use what it fits inside of the AeroPress. In the past, in my wild era, I like to set up the AeroPress right in the edge to try to maximize the water. But in a couple competitions, this happened when I was like already brewing. And beside having a mess in my table, I was also getting disqualified. So now when I'm brewing, if I want to get wild, I just setting up right before. It's not I always go like 3.5. I rather losing this amount of water that will be almost an ounce, that will be about 30 milliliters, than having that issue that I'm gonna make a mess. So past the 1.5 minutes, we're gonna put our filter. We're gonna flip it. I like to do this movement because sometimes there is some coffee grounds that stay up top. So with a little swirl, you're gonna try to melt them fold so all the coffee is running through the water when you're pressing. And we're gonna try to press for around 30 seconds. Some people will ask, how do I know when to stop? With this one, is different, it's easier, well, not different, it's the same, but it's easy to tell with that one. You're gonna hear a little whistle. When the little bubble of air that we keep in there, that is the one that is helping to create the pressure, gonna do like psst, is when you stop. Because in that moment, you are just running air to your coffee, so you are not distracting anything. So, we're gonna take this back to our scale, and we're just gonna add the rest of those 100 milliliters that we're missing. For your hands-on, we're gonna try it in both ways. We're gonna try it before we add the bypass and then after. So you can feel the difference between what will be like a concentrated part that might be a little over or under extracted, and then what should be like balanced. Something very cool about extraction when we're talking about under and over is that technically you will have like a graph where you're gonna measure strength and extraction. So your sweet point should be in the middle when you have the perfect concentration of strength and extraction. But sometimes you can be here and you can be here. So you can have a coffee that will be really intense, really strong, but will be under-extracted. Or you can have something that will be over-extracted and be really, really weak. All those gonna depend on what the coffee have to offer, your ground size and stuff like that. So a lot of people, in this case, we were very intentional, putting all the balance, like for the over-extracted, put it like too strong and over-extracted, and for the other one, too weak and under-extracted, because it's easy to tell. But with the time, the more time that you're drinking coffee, you will be able to tell the difference between something that will be really strong, but without a quality of flavors. So when we're talking about coffee, we don't judge about intensity. We always go about quality. The quality always moves like right or left. So we have some cups maybe, so we can try this.